Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Wisdom Wednesdays. I am Dr. Carol Jenkins Neal, Chair of the Population Health Committee. And today we're going to talk about um, different things that's happening with COVID-19. So I am the moderator. And today's panel, I have three panelists, and we're going to discuss the COVID-19 vaccines, the myths, the misconceptions associated with the vaccine, with the vaccines in communities of color, along with data to talk to us about its safety. I want to introduce you to our three panelists. To my left, I have Dr. Pamela Gobina, and to my right, I have Dr. Martin Sullivan. And to my far right, I have Dr. Rodriguez. And I want to tell you a little bit about these three ladies. I am so impressed of the space that they are in and what they are doing to try to help people, specifically people within the communities of color. And I want to start with Dr. Martin Sullivan first, okay? So she is a medical science liaison for the Midwest region with the Medical Affairs Department at Moderna. She's had many roles, but her roles right now with Moderna, it involves interfacing with key opinion leaders and healthcare professionals. She is responsible for providing medical knowledge, gathering critical insights, and disseminating scientific and medical information. I want each of you guys to please take a look at each of their bios. It is quite impressive. I would like to introduce you to Dr. Pamela Gobina. Dr. Gobina has also served in various capacities. She's a clinical pharmacist, consultant, director of pharmacists. She brought a wealth of knowledge and experience to the Moderna medical affairs team, taking on the role of a MSL covering the Texas region. She has actively contributed to the People of Color Diversity Initiative, and this is a group at the MSL with Moderna striving to diversify the insight sourced from healthcare professionals, particularly those serving communities of color. And our last panel today is none other than Dr. Rodriguez. Dr. Rodriguez has served also in various roles. She serves as a medical science liaison at LabCorp, also the assistant director of epigenetic services at EpiTech Group. In September, during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, Dr. Rodriguez joined the medical affairs team at Moderna as an MSL and member of Moderna's People of Color Diversity Initiative. Dr. Rodriguez plays a crucial role in providing clinical data on COVID-19 vaccine. She also focuses on building robust relationships and thought leaders and healthcare professionals, particularly those serving communities of color. I would like to welcome all three of the panelists to our Wisdom Wednesday series today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I want to start off with Dr. Rodriguez. Dr. Rodriguez, could you please tell us a little about Moderna and the COVID-19 vaccine?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. And I just want to say thank you again to Dr. Neal for inviting us to speak with you today. And we are so happy to be here. So I'll tell you a little bit first about Moderna, just a few little points. Moderna is a biopharmaceutical company, and we've been studying the potential of messenger RNA or mRNA as therapeutics and vaccines for more than 10 years. And a fun fact is that Moderna's name combines the word modified and RNA. And so mRNA medicines are designed to direct the body's cells to produce proteins that can have a therapeutic or a preventative benefit. This is also how Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine works. The mRNA in the COVID-19 vaccine provides the instructions for our body to make the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2, which then tells our immune system to produce antibodies against the spike protein. And so these antibodies that our body has made can provide protection from illness if or when we are infected with coronavirus that causes COVID-19. And so later in the discussion, Dr. Gobina will review some of the recent updates to Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. And then one additional point I'd like to mention, which you have already mentioned, Dr. Neal, so thank you for that, is about Moderna's commitment to DEI. In addition to having a dedicated DEI team, Dr. Martin Solomon, Dr. Gobina, myself, as well as Dr. Dolores Chavez, who could not be here with us today, we're all part of a group called People of Color Diversity Initiative, or POCDI. And our mission is to build relationships with HCPs of color, as well as with HCPs that serve communities of color, to provide evidence-based information about COVID-19 vaccines that helps to combat misinformation, as well as to build vaccine confidence. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I would like to go to you, Dr. Gobina. Could you tell us, what does the CDC recommend about the COVID-19 vaccine?
Thank you, Dr. Neal. So this past June, the FDA's advisory committee recommended updating the current COVID-19 vaccine composition to a monovalent XBB lineage. So based on evidence that was presented along with other considerations, the preferred strain is XBB.1.5. The updated vaccine can offer optimal and better protection than previous versions because the strain composition will be more closely matched to what's currently circulating in the US. Spikevax for ages 12 and up is fully FDA approved, and the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine for under 12 is still under an emergency use authorization, so it's still authorized for use. The CDC does recommend that everyone stay up to date with the most current COVID-19 vaccines for their age group. There's no longer a primary series, there's no more things as boosters anymore. Past formulations are no longer authorized or being given, and there's now a more simplified dosing regimen. So ages 6 months to 4 years are dosed based on their previous vaccination status. Ages 5 and up is irrespective of their previous vaccination status. They'll receive 1 dose of the updated vaccine. Immunocompromised patients will need more doses than that. It's a lot of information, and I'm happy to go into more detail if anyone needs more clarification around dosing and scheduling as well.
Thank you. That was very enlightening. So now I have to go back to Dr. Rodriguez, because could you talk to us about the components of the vaccine? And could you just break it down in simple terms, please? Just break it down in simple terms of how that vaccine travels in the body and what it does once it gets in our body.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so we'll start with the components of the vaccine. So Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine contains lipids that work together to aid in entry into the cell, right? Because we need the vaccine to enter the cells. It also contains, in the most simplified terms, salt, sugar, acid stabilizers, and acetic acid, which is the main ingredient in white household vinegar. And so the actual chemical names of all of the components of the vaccine can be found in the fact sheet or the PI for the vaccines, but those are the simplified terms. And so these components, they all work together to help keep the vaccine in good condition, and so that the molecules remain stable while the vaccine is manufactured, while it's frozen, shipped, and stored until it's ready to be given to a vaccine recipient. And remember, or as you may or may not know, Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine does not contain any preservatives. And so, so the storage and handling process is really important, and all of these components work together to maintain the vaccine until its date of expiration. And the vaccine, of course, also contains the mRNA, which provides instructions that the body uses to build a harmless piece of protein from the virus that causes COVID-19. And so, as I mentioned previously, this protein causes an immune response that helps protect the body from getting sick with COVID-19 in the future. And so what does the Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine not contain? As I mentioned, it doesn't contain any preservatives. It doesn't contain any antibiotics, nor does it contain any metals or aborted fetal tissue or cells. They are also, the vaccines are also not manufactured inside eggs, and they don't contain any egg products. And then as far as how the vaccine travels in the body, so as you know, Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine is administered as an intramuscular injection. And so after vaccination, the mRNA, once you've injected it into the muscle, will enter the muscle cells. Once inside the cells, they use the cell's machinery to produce the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2. The spike protein is found on the surface of the virus that causes COVID-19, on the surface of SARS-CoV-2. And so after that, our cells will display the spike protein on their surface. Our immune system recognizes that the protein is foreign, it's not self, and this triggers our immune system to produce antibodies and to activate other immune cells to fight off what it thinks is an infection. So that this way, this is what our body might do if you actually did get sick with COVID-19, from being infected with SARS-CoV-2. And so what the vaccine does is it prepares your body to fight an infection in advance before you actually get infected, right? And then after the spike protein piece is made, our cells break down the mRNA and remove it from the body, and it leaves the body as waste.
Wow, that is so much. I can't wait when we get to the question and answer part to see what kind of questions I'm going to have for the audience on that question alone. Okay, so thank you very much. So now I want to go to Dr. Martin Sullivan. Could you please talk to me about the prevalence of Black people in clinical trials for the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine?
Sure, thank you, Dr. Neal. So there have been several clinical trials carried out to test our COVID-19 vaccines. So I'm going to break it down between the adults and the pediatric groups. And as we know, there have been a couple of different formulations too. So I'll go through those trials and go through the demographics of individuals who identified as Black or African American. So for our original formulation used for the primary series, the initial 2-dose series, our phase 3 study that looked at participants who were 18 years and older included 10.2% individuals who identified as African American or Black. And for our clinical trial looking at that first booster, there were 10.6% African Americans in our study. And looking at the bivalent formulation, the percentage of African Americans in that trial was 11%. Now, I want to note that this is in line with the percentage of individuals who identify as Black or African American in the US, which is 12.1%. So, as we know, typically clinical trials typically veer more on white males. And in this case, our clinical trials did the percentage of individuals who aligned or identified as Black African American aligned with the percentage of individuals in the US population. And these demographic characteristics were similar between participants who received either the vaccine, the Spikevax vaccine, or those who received placebo. Now, going into the pediatric group, now, our trials in the younger ages were noticeably a bit lower. Our percentage for 12 to 17-year-old participants was 3.4% African American. And our trial for 6 to 11 years old, looking at the primary series, was 10% African American. And looking at the first booster, though, was 11% African American. Now, in the even younger ages, 6 months to 23 months, for the primary series, it was 3.1% participants identified as Black or African American, and the 2 to 5-year-old group, 4.5% are African American or Black. Now, the trial to support the booster in the 6 months to 5 years of age group, they actually evaluated 17-month-olds to 5 years of age. Those individuals participating in the trial were 2.8% identified as Black or African American. And if you want to learn more or see more of the breakdown of the demographics, all this information, it can be found in the prescribing on the PI or prescribing information document as well, or the EUA from the Moderna COVID-19 2023-2024 formulation for the 6 to 11 years old age group.
So I have a question, Dr. Sullivan. The numbers are so low. What has the safety data shown from these clinical trials?
Sure. So during the clinical trials, participants recorded solicited local and systemic adverse reactions and use of antipyretic medication in an electronic diary for 7 days following each injection. So for example, during the trials for the primary series, using the original formulation, participants in the trials recorded adverse reactions for 7 days after the first dose and for 7 days after their second dose. And so most commonly, the most commonly reported adverse reactions, which meant these were reported 10% or more after administration of the vaccine, either the Spikevax or the bivalent formulation. We found that the participants 12 years through 17 years of age reported mostly pain at injection site, fatigue, or headache were the top 3 reported. And this is the case actually for those individuals 12 to 17, 18 to 64, or 65 years and older. I do want to note though, we did find that as the ages went up, the percentage of individuals who reported these events went down. So for example, in the participants 12 years of age to 17 years of age, those who reported fatigue was up to 58.1%. And those who were 18 years through 64 years of age, it was 62% who reported fatigue. And those 65 years of age and older were 58.1% that reported fatigue. The pain at injection site, only 76.3%, 65 years of age and older reported pain at injection site, while those 18 to 64 years of 18 to 64 years of age, it was 86.3% that reported pain at injection site. And then 12 to 17, it was 90.6% that reported pain at injection site. So those were the numbers and the adverse reactions most commonly reported. Now, in addition to the solicited adverse reactions, participants were monitored for unsolicited adverse events for 28 days following each dose. And so among the, for example, the primary series, the phase 3 for the primary series dosing, that was 30,346 participants who had received at least 1 dose of either vaccine or placebo. The unsolicited adverse events that occurred within 28 days following the vaccine were reported in 31.3% of participants. However, 28.6% of participants who received a placebo also reported unsolicited adverse events as well.
Okay, thank you so much. That's very interesting, and I'm sure with any type of immunization, you're going to have adverse effects. So now I want to go to Dr. Gobina. Dr. Gobina, what was the efficacy for the vaccines in the clinical trials?
Yes, of course. So we looked at vaccine efficacy in the original clinical trials, and the efficacy was really high. It was around 93%. Okay. Since then, in updated vaccines, we looked at immunogenicity or immune response, which is looking at the neutralizing antibody titer levels before and after a dose is given, as well as seroresponse rates. We identified predefined criteria for success in these trials, and our studies have consistently shown that once vaccinated, the neutralizing antibody titer levels rise and we consistently meet our set criteria for success. The bottom line is that in these studies, after getting vaccinated with either the original or bivalent formulation, neutralizing antibody titers were boosted against the targeted strains.
Wow. Okay. Like I said, I can't wait for the question and answer session. Dr. Rodriguez, could you talk to us about Dr. Solomon? She gave us some of the information, but what type of data do you have regarding the pediatric population and people that has immunocompromised conditions as it relates to the vaccine?
Okay. So for pediatrics, we understand and respect that some parents have reservations about vaccinating their children.
Yes.
So I hope that this data is really helpful to reassure you about the data that we do have available. And so I'd like to inform you all here today, so that that we also have clinical trial data supporting the use of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine in children. And so in these studies, thousands of children were enrolled from ages 6 months to 11 years of age. And in these trials, in these studies, we evaluated the safety as well as the immunogenicity of primary series and booster doses in children in these studies. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about the safety profile, right? So the safety profile was similar to what was seen previously in adults, and there were no new safety signals that were identified among children that were enrolled in these studies. And so the safety profiles that I'm referring to, Dr. Martin Solomon had reviewed as far as the adverse events that were reported. So they were very similar in children. In younger children and then when we evaluated these children, they were broken down within the 6 months to 11-year age range. They're broken down further into age categories. So I'm just going to go through them very briefly. And so in younger children that were 6 months to 23 months, the systemic adverse reactions were measured differently than they would have been measured in adults, given that these children communicate differently, right? They generally can't talk. And so at this age, and so instead, we looked at reactions. Reactions that were reported were things like irritability and crying or sleepiness, loss of appetite. Those types of adverse reactions were reported for systemic adverse reactions. And so in children, and so now I'll review the safety, and I'm just going to be highlighting the top 2 most reported or most frequently reported adverse events. And for additional information and a complete list of the adverse events that were reported, I would again refer you to the fact sheet or the PI, the fact sheet for children. So in children 6 months to 11 years of age, the top 2 most frequent local adverse reactions that were reported within 7 days of being vaccinated were pain and axillary swelling, and fatigue. And while fatigue and headache were the top 2 systemic reaction in children 37 months to 11 years of age. In the youngest children, 6 months to 36 years of age, irritability and crying were the 2 most frequent systemic adverse reactions that were reported within 7 days of vaccination. To go back to your question about the data that we have in immunocompromised individuals, so immunocompromised individuals were excluded from the phase 3 clinical study of Spikevax for the 2-dose primary series. Although we did allow for inclusion of participants that reported having stable pre-existing medical conditions, as well as those with stable HIV infection. And 22.8%, so almost 23% of study participants were at increased risk for severe COVID-19 in that study due to at least one pre-existing medical condition. So again, those with pre-existing medical conditions that were included in the study represented about 23% of that study population. And while we don't have the clinical trial data for immunocompromised individuals, there have been several studies that evaluate the immunogenicity of COVID-19 vaccines in people with certain kinds of immune compromise, including those that have undergone solid organ transplant procedures. And so, I'd be happy to share those studies with you. And I would also encourage you to review the CDC website for considerations related to COVID-19 vaccination for individuals who are moderately or severely immune compromised.
Thank you. That's very good information.
Dr. Neal,
yes.
I'm sorry. I just thought of something else that I wanted to add when it comes to the adverse reactions that were experienced. The duration of those adverse reactions experienced were 1 to 3 days, depending on the age of the individual in the trial. So the lasting, essentially, the adverse reactions lasted 1 to 3 days.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you both. So Dr. Martin Solomon, could you please talk to us about, explain the meaning of the POCDI to the audience? What is it?
Sure. I'd love to explain that. The POCDI initiative, People of Color Diversity Initiative, that all three of us are a part of, along with, as Dr. Rodriguez mentioned, our other colleague, Dr. Dolores Chavez, as well. People of Color Diversity Initiative, or POCDI, is an initiative which has an overall goal to increase vaccine confidence in communities of color. So, as MSLs, as we all are, we engage with individuals like all of you. So healthcare providers, our key opinion leaders, and our thought leaders. And we go and speak with these individuals and gather insights about immunization practices and the COVID-19 disease and the burden of disease and your experiences on the front line when it comes to immunizing and vaccinating your patients. So as we're meeting with you and speaking with you, we want to gather insights and hear your thoughts and hear what your experiences are and hear what you think or where you think the data gaps are when it comes to when you're speaking to your patients and the questions that they have. And that's what, in general, MSLs do. So we, as in this POCDI initiative, we want to make sure that we are not only talking to a specific subset of healthcare providers, healthcare professionals, and key opinion leaders, but that we are making sure that we hear the voices and concerns of healthcare professionals that serve and are members of the communities of color, because we want to make sure when we are coming back to our medical affairs team that we have data and experiences from all different groups. And also, having an opportunity to do something like we did at the NBNA conference and speaking, making sure that we have and give opportunities to healthcare professionals who are people of color, opportunities to be involved in speaking engagements and speak on behalf of, again, their experiences in their community and what they're seeing. So the People of Color Diversity Initiative is a goal to increase, like I said, vaccine confidence and empower the healthcare provider and key opinion leaders with knowledge and information on how best to communicate different scientific information, medical information to their patients. And I'll invite Dr. Gobina or Dr. Rodriguez to add anything that they think that I missed.
Well, I think Dr. Solomon hit it on the head very well. We're a group of MSLs. There's 4 of us, and then our manager as well that leads the charge. And so, yeah, just like Dr. Solomon mentioned, we interact with HCPs, nurses, pharmacists, physicians, PhD scientists, the academic people And so we want to hear the voice, and Moderna is actually quite committed to hearing the voice of people of color and people who deal with people of color, so who are in the communities. So it's very important that we interact with y'all as an organization and as y'all as individuals, as nurses, so that we hear what's going on and your insights and what you're seeing out there.
Thank you. Dr. Rodriguez, could you tell us MSL? What does it stand for?
Oh, it stands for Medical Science Liaison.
Thank you.
And so as medical science liaisons, just like Dr. Martin Solomon described, our role is to engage with key opinion leaders, healthcare providers, experts in the field to get feedback, to also discuss clinical data, and to get insights and discuss your experiences with right now our COVID-19 vaccine.
Thank you. And I'm sure I'm speaking for NBNA when I say how proud we are to see 3 strong Black women in this space. And at this point, I would like for each of you guys to tell us a little bit about your journey. And I want to start first with Dr. Martin Solomon. And before you start talking, Dr. Solomon, I want to brag a little bit about you. She's from Chicago. I know I must have some Chicago people that's on the call. But yeah, she lives in Chicago with her husband. She has a 19-year-old daughter. She enjoys
19 month.
19 months. 19 months. Oh, that's a big difference. 19-month-old daughter. She enjoys her time playing with her daughter in the park and rooting for a local Chicago sports team, savoring the diverse culinary delights that Chicago's restaurants has to offer. So could you please tell us about your journey? How did you make it to Moderna? Because I'm thinking about young little girls that would love to go into STEM programs or would like to be able to be in the space that you women are in. Could you tell us what was your journey like?
Sure, sure. So it's funny you mentioned little girls. As a little girl, I was always interested in how things worked and the mechanism of action, which is the true term. I didn't know that at the time, but you know how your body worked, how things work. So even in high school, I took a physiology class and just fell in love and loved it. And when I continued my studies in undergrad, I attended U of I Champaign, where I majored in molecular and integrative physiology, and then went to grad school, which is what brought me to Chicago. I'm not originally from Chicago, but I've been here for quite some time now. So I attended grad school here in Chicago in the microbiology and immunology department, where I actually did my thesis work in a virology lab studying Hep C virus. And after doing that, I did a very short postdoc. I kind of knew that I didn't want to necessarily stay in academia at the basic science level. So I did a short postdoc and then moved into the clinical research arena. And there I worked in a clinical research office where I managed a biorepository and got some experience working on regulatory as well. So writing protocols for IRB and managing, like I said, the biorepository and writing the language for that part of the protocols as well. I then moved into industry and worked as a CRA or clinical research associate, where I managed clinical trials, and then moved into medical affairs, where I was finally able to experience the roles in MSL. And then from there on, then I joined the Moderna family at the beginning of 2021.
I think that's awesome. And you have to know when you're in a job and it's time to make that move to go to the next level. And otherwise, you wouldn't be where you are now if you did not leave academia. So that's awesome. So I want to move to Dr. Rodriguez. So Dr. Rodriguez, she resides in New York, and I'm sure I have some New York people that are also on the call. She lives in New York with her husband, 2 sons, and they have a pet better fish. Okay, yeah, I'll let her tell you about that. She enjoys spending quality time with her family, friends, cooking, exercising, and she loves sci-fi movies. So could you tell us about your journey? How did you make it to Moderna?
Sure, of course. So I went to graduate school at the University of Pittsburgh, and I graduated from the Graduate School of Public Health. There I was at with the Department of Infectious Disease and Microbiology. And so after I left Pitt, I really actually didn't want to do a postdoc. My journey is a little bit similar to Dr. Martin Solomon's. I really wasn't interested in doing a postdoc, but I was encouraged to by my thesis director. So I did two postdocs. I did one at Weill Cornell in the city in Manhattan, and then I did a second one at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx. And then from there, I went on to work for a biotech company that's out in Long Island. It's Epigentech. And then, so I was there for just about 2 years. And then from there, I went to LabCorp. And so that was my first role as an MSL. And so I was an MSL with LabCorp in one of their specialty testing divisions that was specifically for drug resistance testing for HIV and hepatitis C. And my training for my PhD was in HIV. So that was kind of like where my heart was, so to speak. And so I was with LabCorp for about 6 years. And you know, while I was there, we fell into a pandemic. And you know, I felt like I had the skills and the background to be involved, and that I didn't know how. But an opportunity came to me to join Moderna as a medical science liaison, and so I was thrilled to be able to join the company, and I felt like that was the way that I could do my part during the pandemic, and it's been very rewarding, and I'm very happy.
Thank you. Thank you. We're glad you made that decision. And now I'm going to go to Dr. Gabina. So Dr. Gabina resides in Texas, happily married for 13 years, proud mother of 3 sons. Wide range of interests includes event planning, crafting, singing. She likes to watch Marvel movies and coaching her son's sports team. So what brought you to Moderna?
So yeah, thank you. I'm a little bit different. I got my bachelor's degree at U of H, University of Houston, and I went over to Texas Southern to get my doctor of pharmacy degree. And that's a fun fact about that. That's actually where my dad went. He did pass away from liver cancer when I was younger. So cancer, oncology was kind of the area that I was focusing on, but I didn't take that route. So I went and did a residency at in San Antonio, and I just kept going. If y'all know Texas, then I just kept going south. So I'm from Dallas, then I went to Houston, and now I'm in San Antonio. After my residency, I went all the way down to the valley, which is the very, very tip of Texas, about 20 miles away from Mexico. That's where I'm at right now. And so after that, well, down here in the valley, I did clinical pharmacy. Like you mentioned, I was consulting, I did pharmacy administration, I did all of that for quite some time. So COVID hit, and since I had children in school, we had no idea what this virus was doing. There was no protection whatsoever for the children. So me and my husband decided that I should stay home and homeschool them. So that's what I did for a short period of time. And that was a great opportunity. I loved that. I enjoyed that, got closer to my kids. I got to teach. It was fun. But then through networking, an opportunity to start a career as a medical science liaison came up. And so I took that. And once the opportunity for Moderna came along, I knew that that was where I needed to be. I knew that that was the place for me. The pipeline is amazing, considering the fact oncology was kind of where my interests were initially. The pipeline was huge. So yes, of course, we started with COVID vaccines, but we have a great pipeline. Check our website for that. The culture, the pipeline, the opportunities here, the attention and the true commitment to diverse populations and even situations was what attracted me, and where I knew I needed to be here at Moderna. And I just wanted to say, the last thing I wanted to say was, yes, I love Marvel movies. I'm all about the superheroes. And I wanted to point out that we definitely, all of us, every one of us in healthcare, scientists, nurses, physicians, pharmacists, all of us are superheroes. And so everybody, all of you, thank you. Thank you for what you've done, and thank you for what you continue to do.
Well, thank you. Thank you, ladies. Thank you. That's so refreshing, because everybody has to take a different path or journey to get to where they truly want to be. And we can tell the three of you guys are very happy in your space. So I want to open up the floor for questions from our audience. I'm sure we have Texas, we have Chicago, and we have New York, our panelists. And I'm sure we have people from all of those different regions. And so do we have any burning questions from anyone? You can put it in the chat box, or you can open your mic and just ask the question. One of the questions I have that's already in the chat box would be, should a person feel safe with only getting 3 shots of the Moderna vaccine? Should they feel safe now, or should they have taken more shots? Or which one of you guys would like to take that one?
I can take it. I can take that one. So I mentioned in the question that you asked earlier about the CDC current recommendations. And yes, there's been many vaccines, and we've built certain kinds of immunity with the vaccines. But the CDC does recommend taking the most recent vaccine and staying completely up to date with the COVID vaccine. So the recommendation for the fall is to get 1 updated vaccine if you're over 12 years old, if you're over 5 years old, actually, to get 1 updated vaccine for the fall.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have Miss Cynthia. She has her hand raised. Could you open your mic, Miss Cynthia, for your question?
Yes, good morning. I really had 2 questions, and I put it in the chat, but I don't think it went to everyone. But the first had to do with, I've taken only the Moderna vaccine. I was recently told by my primary care physician that the medical group that they're a part of will not be providing Moderna, but Pfizer. But the 2 are interchangeable. And so I wanted to, the first question had to do with, can you clarify that a little bit? How safe is it to interchange the 2 vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer? Do you want me to go ahead with my second one as well?
No,
Okay.
no, I think we can start with that one. So, so I will just start out by saying that due to the nature of the format of how we're presenting today, there's limited information that we can provide for questions outside of what is on our label. And so I will try to address your question, and we can always follow up with you after. But what I can say is that there are several studies that have been published for adults that have mixed and matched vaccines from different manufacturers for mRNA vaccines, as well as other vaccines that are available outside of the US. And we know Johnson & Johnson as well was available in the US. But there have been studies that have been published and that have reviewed the safety and the reactogenicity of mixing and matching. And the preliminary results have indicated that heterologous dosing is safe, and the reactogenicity is similar to what has already been seen with homologous dosing. And I will leave it at that, and I am happy to share any additional references that you need to help you support, your decision to receive a vaccine that's different than the one that you received originally from a different manufacturer.
Thank you. And I'm sure that, I'm a nurse, but there are people in my community that I'm sure have the same similar questions. So I would really like to know how to give the best answer to them. My second question had to do with, there is a real concern in the minority community, for example, in various churches, that the long-term effects of the various vaccines are not known, and a distrust for pharmaceutical companies, which makes them hesitant about taking or continuing to take the vaccines. What is the best response for these concerns? And thank you.
I'll take that one. And reiterate Dr. Rodriguez's comment about just the forum and only being able to respond to a certain extent, but definitely able to follow up with you after the event. The concerns, I understand the concerns. The vaccines thus far have been, the clinical trials have began in 2020 with the vaccine, the primary series first being authorized in December. So, and these clinical trials and the individuals in the, at least the primary series clinical trial were followed for 2 years. So these participants in these clinical trials, it's not a, how should I put it? It's not a short duration. They are being followed for adverse events, unsolicited adverse events for at least a 2-year duration. So that is something that you can share as well.
And Doctor, and anyone that has questions that they cannot answer fully, just put your number or email in the chat box, and I will make sure and share it with the panelists so that they can reach out to you afterwards. Okay. I do have several questions in the chat box. Has anyone noticed a change in menstrual cycles after vaccination? This question is from Ms. Helen Friendly Way. And that's the question. Has anyone noticed a change in menstrual cycles after getting the vaccination? For any of the panelists?
I think like Dr. Rodriguez. Yeah. I think I was about to say, I think like Dr. Rodriguez mentioned.
Yeah, there's limitations to how we can answer that question. So the CDC guidelines are an excellent resource for your questions. And these are all excellent questions and questions that we have gotten in the past and that I personally have gotten from family and friends. So we understand your concerns. So I would, refer you to the CDC website, and there they do have a section that talks about fertility. And so what they recommend is that you stay up to date if you're pregnant or trying to get pregnant, or if you will become pregnant in the future, as well as for individuals that are breastfeeding. There's a growing body of evidence on the safety of COVID-19 vaccines, and the benefits of vaccination outweigh the risks of COVID-19 vaccination during pregnancy. So they refer to pregnancy, but they also do refer to any interruptions with the menstrual cycle. So I would refer you there. And what we had mentioned that we would do prior to this webinar was, I'm sure that everyone would like to know the answer to some of these questions. And so we can review the questions and provide references and answers to all of the questions. And then maybe Dr. Neal can circulate all of them to everyone that has joined the call. That way everyone has the information and not just the individual person.
That is excellent, and that's the way we will handle it. I have a very good question from Susan Prater. Do you think that we are in a good place in the prevention and management of COVID? Or are we still struggling, discovering, or maybe even innovatively dealing with COVID? What is your perspective?
I can take that. And Dr. Martin Solomon, you can definitely jump in here. But that's actually a great question. When we're looking at vaccination uptake rates, vaccination uptake is actually quite low, especially for the latest vaccine. So the most recent vaccine before this recent one that's now in the fall was the bivalent vaccine. And nationally, the uptake rate was around 17%. With the primary series, it was around 70 some odd percent. So the rates are quite low. So there's still quite a lot of work to do in the management of COVID and in preventing severe disease from SARS-CoV-2. But I do like how you asked, what is our perspective? That literally is the basis or what we do in our job. We want to know what your perspective is. And so that's actually a great question that we would ask you. What is your perspective, and what do you think that we can do as a whole to increase vaccination rates? and increase trust and increase vaccine confidence. That's literally what our role is as MSLs and as POCD champions.
Awesome.
I was
Go
going to
ahead.
add just one thing. The regulatory bodies are doing their due diligence and also surveillance and epidemiology and surveillance of the virus and evolution of the virus, hence them changing the formulation. This new updated COVID-19 vaccine formulation contains a different strain. So a strain specifically targeting the XBB 1.5 variant. So these new iterations of the vaccine are a proactive way to try to target the current circulating the virus that or variant that's currently circulating in the population, which is why the CDC recommends to continue getting your updated vaccine.
Oh, that is very good information to know. Could either of you ladies tell us about the history of Moderna? Because just think about it. I don't know about everybody else on the call, but I never heard about Moderna until the COVID-19 vaccine. Could anybody give us a little bit of history?
So yeah, our on our website we actually have a little bit about our story, but basically in 2010, Moderna was incorporated, and like Dr. Rodriguez mentioned, our name is combining the word modified and RNA, and it also contains the word modern, which is kind of where we like to be. Operation started in 2011, so we began researching mRNA and looking at different options for that. Started to expand in 2014, opening headquarters in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In 2015, the first human dose of the flu vaccine actually was initiated, mRNA 1440 in a human candidate. 2017, there was a first human dose of a multivalent vaccine as well for parainfluenza, opening new facilities everywhere. And then 2020 is when COVID hit, and that's when Moderna became a household name. So it's like Dr. Rodriguez already mentioned, we have been looking at mRNA and different types of modalities and how we can utilize mRNA for over 10 years.
Thank you. I was really concerned about your very low numbers, Dr. Martin Solomon, when you talked about clinical trials. What can we do to increase minorities in clinical trials? I mean, because those numbers are very, very low. And could you talk to us about the benefits of being a part of clinical trials? Either of you.
Sure. So first, I do want to note, so I think when people see the numbers like 10, 11%, they think, oh, that's slow. But actually, that's aligned with the percentage of African Americans in the US population. So the percentage of Blacks, African Americans in the US population is approximately 12.1%. So when you look at our adult trials, having 10%, 10%, 11% in participants in the trial who identify as Black African American is actually on par with the percentage of African Americans in the US. So that actually is not low when you could compare the two. Now, like I said, when I was answering the question, the pediatrics numbers were noticeably lower. And to your point, it is important to have a diverse demographic when you are conducting a clinical trial, most likely to give healthcare providers, professionals like yourselves, that information to share with your patients when they have questions or say, was this studied in someone that looks like me? So kind of going back to what Dr. Gobina mentioned, that's almost a question that we would ask you guys is
what are the hesitations that you feel like your patients have when it comes to you talking to them about enrolling in a clinical trial? Do you guys actually approach your patients about enrolling in a trial or in trials? Some things that I've heard some patients sometimes say is, I didn't even know a trial was happening. So, do you feel like you are knowledgeable about the trials that are going on in your community? Is that something that you would be more interested in learning about when it comes to knowing what trials are happening? Do you want to be involved in being a investigator in trials? Things of that sort are questions that we would have as well.
Well, thank you. Dr. Jackie Williams have a very good question. I love this question. And it says, what strategies have Moderna used on a grassroots level to reach the minority community?
So we have that's a great question. We are medical science liaisons. So we work directly, we don't work with the community, we work with the community, the healthcare providers. So you guys, who you in turn work with the community. So we do have within Moderna, we have a DEI program that is not medical science liaisons, but we have a group of people that work directly with community and the community science liaisons, and trying to increase, their whole goal is trying to increase participation of Blacks in clinical trials. So interesting, on our first trial, our COVE trial, we tried to make sure that we enroll to match the population, like Dr. Martin Solomon mentioned, and that was part of their efforts. So it's actually a whole division within Moderna that works directly with the community on that.
Wow, I think that's awesome. And to wrap it up, my very last question, I'm trying to get to it. Miss Ashley Pitts, would you like to add, would you like to open your mic, Miss Ashley? All right.
Sorry, I'm in a shared office, so it's a little challenging.
Okay.
I see the question if you want me to.
I know. Yes, I was trying to get to it, but I'm not there. But if you can say the question, yes.
Sure. So the question is around vaccinating children, and can we share what instilled confidence in vaccinating our children? Is it because we were part of the team? She says not being able to verbally communicate is what is most fearful for even myself vaccinating my littlest. So I can say, even for myself, I got vaccinated before I joined Moderna. So Moderna wasn't on my radar when I decided to get vaccinated. And my story is that I was initially hesitant for a number of reasons. Even as a scientist, knowing the data and knowing the research, I was still a little bit hesitant. And really empowering myself with the data is what made me less hesitant. And also seeing that others that I trusted and getting recommendations from my trusted healthcare providers is what made me confident and made me feel confident about vaccinating myself and vaccinating my family. So I remember seeing Tony Fauci get vaccinated, and I remember seeing at the time my boss get vaccinated, and I was thinking to myself, because there's history here, right? And we have all of these ideas of what the ulterior motives could be, in communities of color, and should we get vaccinated or not? And I put those reservations aside because I could see that people around me that I trusted were getting vaccinated, in addition to knowing the data. And so that made me feel very confident, and just seeing the data, which you have available to you as well, and referring to things like the CDC website, where they talk to you about the safety and the reactogenicity, like what to expect after your child gets vaccinated, what were the most common side effects, how many children got fevers, what was the grade level of the fevers, like things like that. That kind of information made me very confident. And now that I have gotten my children vaccinated, and I see that they're fine and they're healthy, makes me confident that they will be fine and healthy when they receive this updated vaccine, which I do plan to vaccinate them as well as myself.
Thank you. Could you tell us a little bit about the main developer of Moderna vaccine? Was it an African American woman? No? Yes? This was a question in the chat box.
That's a great question. There were a lot of people involved in the development and the studies of mRNA. The COVID vaccine itself, there were several people involved. There was African American women. There were several people involved. So to pinpoint one, kind of hard to say, but there were a ton of people involved.
Okay, thank you. So thank you so much. Thank you, audience. Thank you, panel, for sharing such great information, because this is what Wisdom Wednesdays is all about with the Population Health Committee, trying to educate the population. Thank you and have a great rest of your day. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Goodbye.
Thank you.